Hello, so here I am again. I've got a story for you tonight that takes you through the realms of Asgard into Midgard and through time as well, perhaps. But it starts off with Odin wanting to know what's going on in this realm of Midgard back in the days when stories are still being written and the ink is still fresh on the vellum. So he sends Heimdal in disguise to wander the world, in disguise as somebody called Rig. So this story is called Rig Sopa or Rig the Walker, and I'm going to do a short version of it. So Rig, walking across the Rainbow Bridge down into Midgard, found himself in the middle of a deep, dark forest. And a forest that, when it wasn't forest, was marsh, and that meant that going was hard and tough, and walking was difficult. Added to that, when he walked through the trees, he found that the daylight wasn't getting stronger. And in fact, as he was walking, hoping to be leaving the forest, the night was getting darker. Well, yeah, okay, that gives it away, I suppose. It's because it was night. And the thickness of the trees, even though it was beginning to thin, was being overshadowed by the darkness. And he began to hear in the distance the sound of wolves. And the thing about wolves is wolves work together to hunt the weak, take out the lame in a pack. And if you're a lone walker, then a pack of wolves will hunt you. Heimdal is famous for his great vision, and he saw off in the distance a bright light. Well, it looked bright in the darkness, and he walked towards it confidently and strong, because he was, even though he was in disguise, still Heimdal. And he reached where the light was coming from and saw that there was, it looked like a stinking dunghill. It looked like, it was a house, and it was, it was a house made out of turf, grass. So it was almost like a hole in the ground. But it had light coming out from a chink in the door, and it had a door. So he hammered on the door, and he was welcomed inside by great grandmother and great grandfather. And they were the first humans he'd seen. So he stayed with them a while, and he watched what they did, and he was fed by them. But the food he had was foraged, and there's only so much nettle soup that you can enjoy, especially if it's not cream of nettle soup. But while they stayed there, there was only one bed, so they all slept in it. And what do you know? 9 months after Rig in disguise had arrived, and the couple had a child, and they called the child Thrall. And Thrall, well, he had brothers and sisters, and Rig gave them guidance on how to work on things. And, well, they learned the ways of clearing the forest and digging ditches to make the marsh into land that cattle could walk over and you could grow crops on. And Thrall's children were called things like ditch digger, cattle herd, a woodcutter, things like that. All the basic, simple things that you need in order to turn a wilderness into a farm. But Rig could not stay there forever. And he got up and he started wandering again. And he walked and he walked. And this time the forest wasn't quite as dark and the marsh wasn't quite as boggy, but still, as night drew in, he heard in the distance the sound of wolves. And the wolves were hunting and the wolves were prowling. And Rig had this inkling that, well, wolves hunting and eating the sun was somewhere in the future. But he hadn't talked to Odin about it, so he didn't know that much. All he knew was that he needed to find somewhere to spend the night. As he walked, he found a house that was made out of sticks. Well, not just any sticks. It was made from the trees of the forest. And the woods had been shaped and cut, and there were shingles on the roof to shed the rain. And it looked like a good home to live in. So Rig knocked on the door and was welcomed inside by grandmother and grandfather. And, well, he ate with them, but yeah, still only one bed. So 9 months later, there was a child, and this child was called Carl. And Carl and Rig, they talked together, and Rig showed Carl all sorts of things, like the shaping of timber, the turning of bowls, the working of clay into pots. And Carl's children had names like Potter and Turner and Smith. Smith always argued whether he was whitesmith, blacksmith, silversmith, woodsmith. Smith was quite a general name, so they divided them up. But then you had Fletcher and all sorts of work to turn all of the raw materials from the forest, which Thrall's children brought, into useful things, so that the house was filled. And it wasn't just the lads that were doing the work either. You had weaver and spinner, and the women of the house were cooking and making embroidery, well, making cloth, weaving cloth, and making the cloth beautiful, so they could wear fine clothes. But even though the food in this house was served in pottery that had been made by Potter, and it was seasoned and was good, Rig reckoned there was more could be found in this world of humans, and he was on a mission to find out all about the humans and find out if they could be any use for Odin in the war at the end of time. So he got up and he started to walk again. And this time when he walked with a long stride over well-made paths, through forests that had been thinned where fields could now be seen. And the cattle were out there being looked after by Thrall's child Cowherd. And cattle. This time, as Rig walked, he didn't hear the cry of wolves. In the distance, he heard the sound of a horn being blown. A war horn, a hunting horn, he wasn't quite sure. But, well, wolves, they'll devour anything they think they can get away with. And sometimes so will warriors. So Rig walked carefully. And as he walked towards a hill, and high on the hill he saw a house. And the house had a silver sheen to it. It had slate on the roofs, and it had a spine like a boar's back on the top of the house. And as he walked, he didn't have to knock on a door. One of Carl's children, who's Carl, was standing there as a guard with an axe and a shirt made out of steel. And Rig, because he was wearing fine clothes, was welcomed in. As he walked into the house, the fire, that caught his eye, and the smells, they caught his nose, but his sight was drawn to a mother sitting on a throne by the fire. And as she ordered all the things in her farm and in the country into patterns and into a state of affairs that would be good and would flourish, she sewed and embroidered patterns onto cloth. Maybe the turmoil in her head was being straightened out into the designs. Or maybe the women who were weaving, they were the ones who were sorting out the warp and weft of how things would be. Either way, Mother welcomed him, and a feast was prepared. And when Father returned, Rig was able to sit by the fire close to them, so close he could see the detail on the embroidery on King's shirt. And they ate fine food that had been brought to the table. Still though, only one bed. So Rig slept in it with father and mother, and there was a child born, and this child was called Jarl. And to Jarl was given the secrets of statecraft, of the commanding of weary minds, and of the giving of loaths to those who are hungry. And Jarl had children like Hunter and Trader and Warrior. But all of them would have been cold and hungry if it wasn't for Thrall's children chopping wood and bringing it in, or for Carl's children shaping stone into steel, into swords and spears, or more importantly, into ards that could carve the soil and make a way for the ground to bring forth grain. And that was where the bellies were filled from. So Rig, having seen all these things, thought he'd had a pretty good tour of Midgard, of Middle-earth, of the realm of men, and enough to tell Odin about when he returned to Asgard. And as he crossed the Rainbow Bridge back out of time, the story echoed through the world until it was recorded in many ways. And this was my interpretation of it for this evening. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like this, then listen to the other stories that are around. Thank you.